again. As always, the custom have a drink before we begin.
Soldiers,
so what is up, guys?
battle.
Today we have the Drogoz video. This one I'm thinking is actually going to be short. Now, Drogoz is actually one of my favorite champions to play. I'm a lower tier Drogoz. I'm not a higher tier Drogoz. I do have less games played on him than someone. So a lot of people are automatically going to say, "Oh, well, you're a bad Drogoz. You don't know what you're talking about." But I will start with something. Drogoz is a very interesting champion because he has flank-like potential. He plays very similar to Eevee as a damage, only a much higher health version. He has high damage per shot with a relatively fast fire rate. It's between Cassie and Strix in terms of fire rate in the damage class. He has a higher degree of health, being 2400. He has unparalleled aerial mobility, especially if you're running worm jets. But I see a lot of people shitting on worm jets right now, and it's a bit odd to me. I don't understand why. It is quite powerful, but what's important to know about Drogoz is all 4 of his legendary cards are viable. Reign of Terror, in my opinion, is a bit more specialized. It's always a good, consistent card, simply because of the 5-second cooldown reduction and the firing 6 shots. It actually takes some getting used to, remembering that it activates instantly. I have to remind myself when I'm playing Reign of Terror, because I am used to having to prep salvo. A lot of people don't like Combustible because they like the Fire Spit Salvo combo, and Combustible kind of messes with that, but in my opinion, Combustible is the best card you can run. Wormjets gives you unparalleled mobility, and then Fuselage for just direct damage finishing, but we'll pick Fuselage. Now, in my opinion, the evolution of this champion has changed quite dramatically. He went from being, in my opinion, the most skilled noob tube in the game to this underwhelming can't hit shit damage to now a fair and balanced champion, believe it or not. Back in the days, I remember when Fuselage was deal 35% maximum damage, deal 50% maximum damage. Or, I mean, 35% more damage and 50% more damage. I hated it because you could not... You got lucky and you got kills. Let's put it that way. I'll just pick a build. It doesn't matter. This is what I mean. Alright, so we're on Fuselage right here. Like, you got lucky on that. And you had a kill. Ying is a better example back because she has higher health. So, bam. That would be a kill in the old days. Plain and simple. And it really, in my opinion, kind of sucked. Because, like, if you played a good game where I was a flanker and I would just try and do that, Drogoz, he wouldn't even go up into the air and he'd still be able to get 2 shots off and kill me. So, I didn't necessarily like it. Now, looking at your skills, the key here real quick, before we get into, like, loadouts and playstyles and everything, is to note. He actually has 3 movement abilities. It doesn't look like it, but he does. So you have, by holding X, you have your booster, which enables you to go up into the air. That is a movement ability, because if you try and jump, it enables you to get up higher, and you combo it off of your other abilities very well. The next ability that you have is your thrust. Now, your thrust is important for something like this. So you want to fly, thrust, and fly some more. And it lets you cover ground very effectively, and it gives you good mobility. These give you good aerial control. You can fly up and range a shot as you backtrack. You can thrust forward to push up and be aggressive on a push. Or you can just use your mobility like that. Another thing I think that's very important to note, let's say Khan chucks you off the edge. You can use your ult to get you back. Your ult is a movement ability. Now, in my opinion, if you were to compare the major flight champions, and what I mean by that are champions that have designated flight abilities. So we're not including Maeve with her pouncing, but Eevee, Drogoz, and Willow. Those, in my opinion, are the major flight-based champions. And not necessarily Drogoz, because his dash can be used on the ground or in air. Um, he falls in the same boat as Maeve does. I would say the same thing with Pip and Ruckus. Those are all champions, and Furia, they have flight, but it's not primary. Eevee has Blink, which can be used to give you vertical mobility. It's not very effective because you drop. You have flight, you have your Soar, which causes you to actually have a controlled flight. And then you have Willow, where Willow has her Flutter, which doesn't really fucking do much. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I mean, if you have a build based around Flutter, I don't know what to tell you. That's just in my opinion, that's a bad build. If it works for you, that's good, but that ability, in my opinion, sucks. You gotta buff the hell out of that thing. But Drogoz, in my opinion, has the best mobility. Now, if you want to talk about builds, so a lot of people say, well, what's the best build for Drogoz then? Well, there really isn't. They're all viable for different situations. If the enemy team is clustered up and you only have, say, one tank, not a very strong tank, maybe a Barrack, a Ruckus, a Torval, someone that's often called a lower-end solo tank, Combustible is good because you can fire spit, shoot it, and knock everybody off the point. Fuselage is good for overall damage, but you have to be able to use your shot. You have to realize that if you run Fuselage, you're missing out on any bonus damage on Combustible because you don't want to shoot your fire spit, you want to shoot your target instead. So if you're running Fuselage, you have to run the risk, okay, my aim is good where I can lead my shots. I can consistently 1 and 2 shot people. Versus being able to put out damage over a larger area. Basically, the way I put it, Fuselage turns you into a direct damage champion. You're still going to have area damage, but your primary focus is not doing that. And then you have Worm Jets. Worm Jets gives you mobility. If you have to deal with a Koga, you want Worm Jets on your side. And people are going to say, wait, what? You want Worm Jets? No. Well, Koga has a hard time going up in the air and combating aerial champions, even though he can climb up walls. In a map like Serpent Beach, if Drogoz is flying over the point with Wormjet, then kind of just, you know, feathering his X button or his space bar or his A button so that, or whatever the hell the Switch has, I don't even play the Switch, so that he can kind of feather it and keep himself in the air. If he's over the middle where Koga has no way to climb up and get to an even level with him, Koga actively has to aim upwards, and Drogoz has the ability to just aim downwards like he's doing already. And then Reign of Terror is more specialized, and for me, Reign of Terror is a good generic card to use. It's a good filler. There's not as high of a skill requirement. It's the low skill requirement here. Wormjets, you need to be able to control your flight very effectively to be good on it. Fuselage, you have to have good aim and be able to lead your targets. And even though Combustible, you would say, well, it's your best damage option, it's so easy to use, but auto-aim in this game is bad on console, where, yes, I have to mention it. I know I detract, and I'm being a hypocrite because I say it doesn't matter, but this is the one time I'm going to side with them. Because, just to showcase this, see if I can.
From above.
Now watch, alright? So the auto-aim is going to try and hover me to specific champions. So I'm going to try this. So we're going to fire spit, right? Relatively close. It's relatively hard to get that on a consistent basis, especially in a situation like this, right? I didn't mean to hit that, though.
Ooh, rough.
See, there's that, but what if I have to move?
Back to your hole.
I barely hit it. Miss. That's an example. So the auto-aim does hurt and does hinder Combustible a little bit. That's an important thing to note. So looking at these cards, they all have advantages. The problem is you need a build for each card. Don't sit there and say, I don't need a build for any of these cards. These cards are fine. let's start with Wormjets. Wormjets, in my opinion, has the highest degree of difficulty here. So this is, I believe I can fly now. So this is all about your thrust. This is all about thrust and boost. So every time you get an elimination, you reset your fuel. So if you stay in the air and you just rain death from above, you can stay in the air. It's kind of an infinite build. And you have the 50% booster fuel capacity. So that will add on with those. Those two cards are great cards to have together. You have Condescension, which, hitting an enemy champion with Fire Spit, that to me is my filler card here. You can put more points into that, you can have that at level 5, but you're still going to be stuck with a 6-second cooldown. If that card applied to every enemy that you hit with Fire Spit, that would be better. Because if I hit, you know, 3 people and I took 3 seconds off and I had a reset where I could re-Fire Spit again, that would be great. Reign of Terror is a nice card, I like it. Booster consumes less fuel for 5 seconds after using thrust. I would put more points into that if I could. Like if for example, if we had a 20-point system here where it gave me another 5 points. And say it gave you an extra legendary, an extra loadout card and 5 points. So I would have 4 points that I could put. I would have the other 4 points in the Reign of Terror, if I'm being completely honest, because. Or Rain of Fire, because it is a very good card, because the longer that you are flying, the harder you are to hit. And then you have Propel, which is increase the forward distance of thrust by 75%. That's important. Let's get outside. I think that'll showcase it better if I go outside. So, this increases the flight speed of your booster. Now, mind you, it does not make you go up higher. It makes you move faster. So what do I mean by that? And using thrust right there to propel yourself forward is key, because you could have no booster fuel and still thrust. Wait for the cooldown here. And that lets you effectively cover ground over large distances. I just kind of tailed off at the end there because I wasn't feathering it. I just held it down. There you go. That's how you use a thrust. So that's basically Wormjets in a nutshell. You're losing out on all damage potential from mobility. And you wanna know why? Hi. 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 Oh, you wanted to hit me up here? Oh. Bye. That's Wormjets. Now, the next thing I want to show off before we start off with Fire Spit is your ultimate buff. And what I mean by that is there are not one but 2 benefits to it. So first off, if you shoot your Fire Spit forward and you shoot the Fire Spit itself, it causes an explosion that deals 1,000 damage. That's always a wonderful benefit. But if you spit on a target, you know, okay, they take that 150 damage, but when you shoot them, you deal 30% bonus damage to them for the next 4 seconds, which is basically your next 4 shots if you just fire the next 4 shots in a row. Now, that's important to note, because I want to mention that that is a very important thing to note on Fuselage, right? If you're going to run Fuselage, and I do have a Fuselage build that I want to show off, alright, so you're going to run this, you're not going to be shooting your explosion. You're going to be hitting an individual target and doing that. So here's what I mean. So this build right here is very unique. So this is meant on weapon hits increase reload speed by 50% for 3 seconds. So you hit your shot, and it lets you reload. You hit, reload, hit, reload. He does have a relatively slow reload speed, and this is a good, effective way. This is how I think reload speed should work. If you're hitting your shots consistently enough, then you need reload speed because of the damage that you're doing. If you aren't hitting your shots, then you need to work on your aim before you think about reload, I need reload speed. On a champion like Buck, Makoa, where they have lower ammo counts, I understand that. On champions like Strix, Kinessa, that have just outrageously long reload times, I understand it. Or even if you're buffing a champion that has, like, no reload time at all, like a Victor or a Koga. Like, their reload time is so short. I understand if you want to run Deft Hand, but this is better because you benefit better from Wrecker and Cauterize than you do here. You do apply Cauterize consistently enough. So Hot Swap is a great card to run here, and this is very effective because you can fire off, you know, 1 or 2 shots, finish off a target, quickly reload, so that you don't get jumped by a flank in a reload as much. Spitfire is a good card to run. This reduces the cooldown salvo by 1 second for every shot hit, and that's important because if you remember, you're going to be using salvo for burst chunk damage, and that will stack with Hot Swap. So, you know, if you hit your salvo, you reload much faster, and then you can go back to firing off your regular rockets. If you were to hit all of your rockets, which is kind of hard to do, you're going to usually hit about 4 or 5 at a minimum, but you're not going to hit 6. It's very rare I see people hitting 6. You could take anywhere from 4 to 6 seconds off the cooldown. So that's good. On a 20-second ability, to drop it down to 14 seconds is good. Follow the scent. Again, that's not a important card to run in here. It's a filler card in an instance where, say, you need to have a burst chunk of damage. You need that explosion, that big AoE burst. That applies a little bit of Cauterize for you. It's not enough, but it's a good filler card. Propel just for some basic mobility, and then Fire Spit's cooldown is reduced for each. Again, those 2 cards stack, and that's important because I do use this build on occasion with Combustible or Reign of Terror. But even on Fuselage, where this is my designated Fuselage build, I run this on Fuselage all the time. Why would I put that card in there if it's not effective? Well, because there's not a lot of good loadout cards you can run around Fuselage. Specifically Fuselage, outside of Hot Swap. Literally, almost all the cards you're running are going to be Salvo, Fire Spit, Thrust, Booster. There is the crowd control reduction card, but you don't need that on a Fuselage build. You would need that on a Thrust build, on a Wormjets build. Now this is what I want to mention right here. So, you're not going to be using your Fire Spit like that. That's not how you're going to use your Fire Spit. This is how you're going to use your Fire Spit, especially on Fuselage.
Killing spree.
Boom. That's how you use your Fire Spit on Fuselage. It is a guaranteed 2-shot on anything not a tank. That's important to note, because the bonus damage you get stacks.
That's 5 in a row.
Boom. That's how you use Fire Spit with Fuselage. You don't want to use it for that burst right there, because you're not using it right then. That's how you use it. Bam, they're dead. Now, I do want to mention something here, and I'm going to champions. This is the advantage to that Fire Spit, right? Where if you look, okay, so we're using the, not the bonus damage, the actual 30% bonus, right? So, if you hit Eevee with it while she's in her ice block, it'll carry over when she comes out. If you hit, what's another champion I could do? If you hit, it won't work on Grok during Ghost Walk. What was the champion? There was a, if you do Khan during firing line, it will work on him. When he's out of his firing line, he'll take that bonus damage. Leon, when she's in her ult, she'll take the bonus damage when she comes out of it, if you survive. Makoa, even with Leviathan in his ult, takes the bonus damage. Torvald, during recharge, not effective. He has a personal shield. The Fire Spit will sit on the shield, so it will effectively one-shot the shield. pretty much without Wrecker for the most part. Well, if he's in his recharge, it will one-shot the shield, basically. But it will not do any bonus damage to him. Terminus, when he has the power siphon up, same thing. Moji in Magic Barrier, same thing. These are all examples of abilities that, if it doesn't make you untargetable, that's the thing. Like Ceres and Shadow Travel, Grok and Ghost Walk, Koga and Shadow Step, they're not gonna work. The Fire Spit's gonna go straight through them. Next build, so now we talk about the combustible build, and this is the Fire Hot. I love this build. So this is a pretty straightforward and generic build. So this is 75% reduced healing to enemies hit by Fire Spit. And that's important because, remember, you are doing damage over time for 2 seconds after the initial explosion. So they cannot out-heal that. This is a good build if you want to buy Wrecker or if you want to buy Deft Hands, because you're going to be using that Fire Spit so often that you're going to not really need Cauterize that much. If you want to get it, I understand, but Wrecker's better if they have shields, or Deft Hands if the rest of your team has Cauterize. Like, you should not buy, if you're on this build and you're on Combustible, you should not buy Cauterize out of the gate. Buy something else. Plain and simple. Leave the red category should always be second on a Drogoz. I know that's a bit odd to say, because everybody tells me, no, Cauterize all the time, Cauterize all the time. But, no. So Fire Spit's cooldown. So again, I have the Masterful and the Spitfire in here. And then mostly I have Condescension because I am going to be hitting my Fire Spit so often it gives me that added mobility. And Propel again. It's a good card to have in every loadout, just so that you can move around better. You can go higher and make targets harder to hit. This is a good build to run. Now, it's important to know, alright, so they're on the point, right? Ah, did too early. Hold on. I did too early. See, there's the auto aim, I'm still. There's that damage over time. There's that damage over time, and there's the knockback. And now you're trying to force people off the point. And you do get a slight damage bonus, in my opinion, because that damage over time effect that gets applied, if you follow up a shot, it's free damage because it's caught that they can't out-heal.
Immortal!
So that's why we're talking about it being very effective. And you see how fast the Fire Spit comes back, really. So that's a very important thing to note. And see, I'm talking about Drogoz who has a fire loogie, and here I am hawking up loogies because of my problems. Reign of Terror, the last card we want to talk about, and this is called Who Said You Could Have a Shield. Now I want to mention right here, alright, before we go look at that build. Salvo, alright, so now a lot of people shit on Salvo because Salvo is a bad card. And without Reign of Terror, it's a bad ability. Here's why. So first off, you load all of your remaining rockets into the launcher. That means whatever rockets you have in there, you have to have a minimum of, I know it's 4. It may be 3, but I personally have to have 4 rockets in there to use it. For whatever reason, my game doesn't let me. It may be 3, it may be 4. I haven't checked because I haven't played. The last game that I played, Drogoz, the servers crashed in the middle of the game and everyone got disconnected and it wouldn't let us log back in. But, so you load all your remaining rockets into the launcher. Alright! And your next fire releases all of them. And they explode in a larger radius and they deal 250 per shot. Wait, what? 250 a shot? My rockets deal 850. I lose 600 a rocket. What the fuck? But that's okay. See, there's a couple of things you can do. I think that's important. Remember, you're doing 1500 if you hit all of your rockets. That's important to note. If you hit all of your rockets, you're doing 1500. And remember that you deal 200% more damage to shields. What does that mean? Why would I want to do that? Well, this right here is your designated anti-shield. You do 3000 damage to shields. So one salvo cuts Makoa's shield in half. Almost Fernando's shield in half. Khan's shield in half. One-shots any Torvald and Ruckus shield. It's important to note that you can burst down by such a high degree of damage, right? It is your anti-shield thing. And Salvo does stack on Fire Spit. So you essentially, you're doing 1500 if you hit all your rockets. Well, if you do Fire Spit, you can add another burst on top of that, which I'll showcase in a minute. So this is the build. So, first off, Reign of Terror now has a 5-second cooldown reduction, so it's a 15-second ability. That puts it on par with damage abilities. So it's not a Shaolin plant. It's faster than a Shaolin planted. It's faster than a Tyra Firebomb now, because of this one card. So that's good, because those are high-value damage cards, and so is Salvo, if you know how to play with Salvo. It activates instantly, and it always fires 6 shots. So that's important, because if you only have 1 or 2 rockets, remember, you have to reload automatically after Reign of Terror, because you fired off these rockets. So if you only have a few shots, and you activate it, it fires off everything, and you reload. So if you get surprised by a flank on this build, before you're about to reload, you know, you may only have 1 shot, but you need 2 to finish them off, you say, no, fuck you, Salvo. And then you reload and hope that they have to retreat. Now this is the build. This is important. So this is, Decimate is important on this. 50% more damage to shields. Now, why is that important? Because you now deal a total of 300% damage to shields. That's 4,500 damage if you hit all your rockets to shields. You, Salvo, shields are dead. Or about to be. Like, plain and simple. And if you have someone on your team like a ground-based champion like a Tyra, who has Wrecker, oh god, that shield is dead. Because remember, Salvo by itself deals 200% damage. This card doesn't add 50% more damage. It increases the damage you deal by 50%. It deals more damage to shields. So that's 300% instead of 250. Which is still better, even if it is 250, it's still better than 200% because it's a bigger number. Propel, again, there's your filler. Altitude, again, there's your filler. You could probably take altitude out if you want, but you do want a little bit more vertical mobility with Reign of Terror, because your best bet is to fly above and barrage them from above. Fire Spit and Follow the Scent here, because you can run the Salvo combo, the Fire Spit Salvo, a lot easier. And I do want to mention something, so we go over here, right? So, wow, they are really close together. I don't like that, but I don't have a choice, really. So watch what you're gonna do. Yeah, I've got to kill them. I need them to reset.
Double kill.
There we go.
Godlike for the last time.
Alright, so here we go. So, normally, this is what you would want to run. Normally, this is what you would do. Because you get that nice burst right there. That's a waste of your time. That's not what you want to run on this. Just plain and simple. Let's wait for that cooldown to reset. I'm going to show you exactly how you want to use it. If you're not, basically, let me put it this way. If you're not running worm jets or combustible, you don't want to do the Fire Spit explosion. You're actually losing damage in the long run. So that's what you want. That takes off much more damage and lets you burst down a tank very quickly. You saw how fast he lost health. He lost almost a half health bar because of the 1500 damage plus the Fire Spit 30% bonus. It's more damage. It's more bang for your buck in the long run. And that's important. Now we're going to talk about items real quick before we go into tips and tricks. So, here's your item selection. Illuminate. You don't fucking need it. If you're above a Strix, your job as Drogoz, remember, you always have the high ground except when Willow ults. And I'll start tips and tricks early. Hey, if Willow ults, let me show you what you do. You punch her. You fly up into the air and you punch the bitch. That's exactly what you do. Because you don't want her to have the high ground. Why does she get to have the high ground? Resilience is good, although you can build it into your loadout if you want. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but it's nice to keep you from getting stunned in the air. Like, if a Damba is really good on his toss, and he's chucking them in the air to knock you out, it can be pretty bad if you're on a Wormjets build and you're flying around, and all of a sudden you're on the ground in the middle of a Tyra Firebomb and an Anara Cripple Field, and they're all low health saying, "Hi, Drogoz, remember us?" Yeah, that's not a pretty sight. It can be helpful. Haven and Blast Shields are really what you want to run to prevent damage. I would recommend Haven. Haven is also less important on Drogoz because of your aerial mobility. It's harder for a Strix to hit you. So you may only need tier 1. If you're facing snipers, you may only need tier 1 just to make yourself a 2-shot kill. Or a 2-shot kill with a headshot. Or a 3-shot kill to a Strix. You don't want to look at it and say, I need Haven to protect me from a Victor. Well, Victor's got Hipfire and Iron Sight, so he's got 2 different ways to fuck you up. But Strix is going to burst you down and force you to retreat. Without Haven, really, pretty much you have to retreat after 1 shot. Rejuvenate's not as effective because there's not a lot of healing abilities that hit you in the air. Maybe if Furia's running Solar Blessing, but you don't need to run Rejuvenate with that. That is good to go on its own. Again, if you're running multiple healers, always buy Rejuvenate to make their job easier. Veteran, it is actually slightly beneficial on a Wormjets build because you're going to be flying so much. So, I actually can recommend Veteran, which is sad. You know, Xin is a champion, Saris is a champion, but believe it or not, Wormjets, Drogoz, if you're planning on staying in the air, if you're doing an infinite reset, where you're just constantly staying in the air, Veteran will help. Kill to Heal and Life Rip are better options. Remember, it's 850 a shot. The more damage you deal per shot, the more you want Life Rip. The more damage per second you deal, the more you want Life Rip. But Kill to Heal is always a good option because of consistent eliminations, especially if you are running the Hot Swap build, especially if you are running a Wormjets build where getting eliminations or getting weapon hits will give you certain perks that we explained before. You're going to get the same benefit with Kill to Heal. Items. I said don't buy anything in the red category to start the game, and that's true. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this. Now, a noob tube strategy that I myself have to, I admit I do it, morale boost. You don't really need morale boost, but damn is it satisfying. Especially if you miss your ult. Especially if you get killed in your ult and it resets to a big whopping goose egg. Especially if you miss your target because Khan decides to, if Khan decides, firing line, commanders grab away. You can't catch me. I'm running away. And you are just about to hit him and you run out of time. So morale boost is good. It's also effective because it allows you to continuously lock down a target. Constantly ulting the same target. By the way, it's a great counter to Makoa's ult. Makoa, you know, oh, he's the top tank in the game. He can't do shit against your ult. He can't shell spin away. He can't hook you out of it. He can't put up his shield and try and block it. His only option is to try and shoot you out of the air. And if he's on Davy Jones' locker, by the way, I do want to mention, he can outrun you. He can outrun you. You've got to wind up right next to him and hope he was a second off on it. Because Davy Jones' locker, I have done it. It is a counter to a Drogoz ult now. So they actually gave Makoa a chance to survive. Nimble. I see so many Drogoz players buying Nimble. Stop. It doesn't make you move faster in the air. It only helps you on the ground. And even though you'll see me a lot of times on the ground and I talk about being in the air a lot, that's because you don't need to be on the ground all the time, which means Nimble is a waste. Nimble is better used on champions that have no mobility or that need that extra boost in mobility to get around. other champions, like damage champions that need to get around flanks, or tanks that are trying to push up and be aggressive. It's not good for champions that have good mobility skills. Kronos is great because, Kronos is great because you're going to be able to have your cooldowns reset a little bit faster, but it's not a must-have on him. Master Rider can be good for positioning, but again, it's not a requirement. I pretty much just run morale boost because I don't need anything else. I don't need the Master Rider because I believe I can fly now. And I don't need the Nimble because I believe I can fly now. And I don't need the Kronos because I built that into my loadout, which is what it's there for. So that's why oftentimes I'll run morale. Now I said don't buy the red category right off the bat. Well, I already explained that salvo is auto wrecker, okay? If you hit all 6 of your rockets in salvo, you are going to do 3,000 damage to a shield. Not a lot of shields can withstand that, and if they do, they're pretty low. So wrecker is not a great choice because you can just use salvo as a designated wrecker. If you don't like salvo, you can't hit the shots on it consistently enough. I do understand wrecker, especially if you are running fuselage where you deal 1,000 on a direct shot, and that extra bonus damage to a shield lets you one shot or 2 shot it. Deft Hands, again, it's a good card to run. You're better off having Hot Swap 5 in your loadout because like Kronos, it saves you more credits in game. But if you want to run it, that's fine. Cauterize, again, you don't need it if you are running the Fire Spit card. If you're running Follow the Set, you don't really need the Cauterize to be that effective if you're planning on shooting your Fire Spit. If you are running Fuselage, if you are running Reign of Terror, where you're not going to be shooting your Fire Spit as much for the explosion, then you need to pick up Cauterize because you're not getting that bonus Cauterize off of Follow the Set. But that's why Fuselage, in my opinion, is a harder card to run. I remember the days where it was such a noob tube, you got lucky on 1 or 2 shots and you killed something. Now it requires a bit more planning because do you want Caught? Do you want Wrecker? If you're running up against a Torvald, you need that Wrecker so that he doesn't just sit there and spam shield you, but you also need Caught to keep from healing so that once you destroy the shield, they're not getting healed up underneath it. And obviously, don't buy Bulldozer. You're better off buying Cauterizer Wrecker. Alright, so now we go to the tips and tricks. Let's showcase this off a bit. I don't remember what build I'm running, and I completely fucked up my flight. You know what? Fuck it, here we go. I literally just blew my ult to get up top, because I didn't feel like wasting the cooldown. This is something that's important at range if you... Where's the best sunlight here? Here we go. At range, if you want to hit your Fire Spit, this is something that's important to follow. You're better off watching the shadow of your Fire Spit as it flies across the ground rather than actually watching your Fire Spit itself. If you ever see a lot of Drogoz players that go like this, where they aim high, they look a little bit low, and then they spit up. I don't have the accuracy for it right now because I'm not really paying attention. I'm trying to like watch everything else. But it is a very effective strategy because that will give you a better degree of control. Now this affects better on bright maps. Not Bright Marsh, although it does help there, but brightly lit maps like Jaguar Falls, like Bright Marsh, where there's a lot of sunshine. Or longer sight lanes. It doesn't necessarily help on longer sight lanes because, you know, on Serpent Beach, you know, it has good long sight lines for a Drogoz, but if you can't see the shadow, you're not going to be as effective. Another thing to realize with the Fire Spit Salvo combo, which I don't remember what I'm running, so that's going to be important. Let's just say Reign of Terror here, okay? So when you Fire Spit into a salvo, you need to remember that it activates instantly. So you need to let your Fire Spit travel farther. The biggest thing that I see a lot of people miss on their Fire Spit is they fire off whatever round they're trying to do too early and they miss whatever combo they're going for. So an example... And now you also have to weigh the trade-off that you don't want to miss the majority of your bursts. But you see how much damage you're actually able to do at a range as opposed to actually running that. Another thing that's important to note, that your ult is not effective against Ying. And I'm gonna use these pits here as an example.
Dragon's fury!
Oh no! She teleported! That's the real Ying! That's the real Ying right there! I ulted a clone! It's completely wasted! What have I done? Don't ult Yings. It's not good. It's just not good. But anyway, that is Drogoz in a nutshell. If you like playing on area damage champion that can deal a lot of damage but requires a higher degree of skill now. He's very flexible, he's very versatile. This is a good champion for you. He also counters a lot of champions that people say are overpowered or broken, like Moji, like Koga, mostly because they don't have great vertical mobility. Koga does with Skewer, but he has to burn all of his energy to gain that vertical mobility. So if he's burning all of his energy just to get that vertical mobility, you have the advantage because now he can't escape anything you follow up with. But thank you for watching. I hope this has been educational.